You open your eyes, and the ceiling feels heavier than it did yesterday. Morning light slips between the curtains, yet it fails to warm the cool recognition forming in your chest. Something has ended in the quiet hours before dawn, though nothing obvious has changed. The clock still blinks its indifferent numbers. The kettle still waits on the counter. Yet a raw awareness paces the hallway of your mind, whispering that the life you rehearsed is no longer willing to carry your absence. You stand in front of the mirror, and the reflection refuses to play along. It shows the hours you bartered for brief approval. It shows the years you traded for the illusion of stability. You notice lines that were not there last season, shadows beneath your eyes that speak of dreams deferred until they calcified into decor. No outside critic delivers this verdict. The face itself testifies. At breakfast, you scroll past images of people smiling at destinations you once promised yourself you would visit. You keep scrolling as if motion could drown recognition. The whisper continues. This is not depression. It is awakening. Every sip of coffee tastes different because you no longer drink merely to wake the body, but to keep company with the thought that you will not get another version of this morning. A memory flashes. Someone you loved once said, there would be time, when the children grow up, when the promotion arrives, when the debt is cleared, then life would begin. That someone is gone now, or perhaps alive yet unreachable behind their own routines. Either way, the promise expired. You feel it in your pulse. The promise was counterfeit, printed by fear and handed out by a society that files every soul into lines marked productive or compliant. The whisper grows clearer. It reminds you of the philosopher who insisted that the real horror is not death, but living as though immortal. His challenge was brutal. Live in such a way that you would choose to repeat this day forever. You picture the next 24 hours looping without end, the panicked commute, the shallow meetings, the jokes you laugh at because silence would reveal disinterest. Would you sign that contract? The answer forms like a lump at the base of your throat. Number. You sit very still. The refrigerator hum becomes the soundtrack of reckoning. You realize the distance between habit and desire has grown into a canyon. Across that canyon stands the self you abandoned when comfort promised safety. That self is not a fantasy hero. It is simply a version of you that refuses to edit itself for applause. You try to remember the last time you spoke without rehearsing. The memory hides. The phone vibrates. A message from a colleague asks you to pick up extra work. Reflex moves your thumb toward assent. You pause. Reflex is the first life thinking. The life that obeys even as resentment simmers. The new awareness suggests a different response. You type, I do not have capacity for that right now. Your thumb hovers, pulse races. You hit send. The world does not collapse. A small chime indicates the message traveled. Something inside exhales for the first time in years. Driving to work, you notice billboards promising happiness once you purchase the correct fragrance or insurance policy. You used to let such images pass like scenery. Today, each one looks like a mask of the same lie. The philosopher called these distractions opiates for a species terrified of its own potential. You grip the wheel. The city seems caught between rush and despair. You wonder how many passengers on the sidewalk carry the same silent panic. At the office, you observe yourself slipping into practiced smiles. You hear a voice in your head asking whether the smiles are gifts or disguises. When a manager praises someone else, you watch jealousy curl in your stomach. Instead of swallowing it with forced politeness, you acknowledge it. Jealousy points toward an unlived capacity. The moment you name it, it softens. You offer genuine praise because you see now that another person's success does not subtract from yours. It only illuminates the path you left untaken. Lunch break arrives. Colleagues debate television finales, their words drifting like elevator music. You step outside where sunlight feels undeservedly bright. You eat alone on a bench, tasting every bite. Your mind wanders to a project you shelved years ago, a small enterprise that felt too risky. The idea returns now not as guilt, but as invitation. You jot a single sentence about it on your phone. The sentence looks fragile. Still, it exists. Existence is authority. Afternoon tasks proceed. You notice each time the body tenses at minor criticism. Each time it slumps under habitual compliance. You correct posture. You breathe longer exhales. Co-workers sense a difference, though no announcement is made. One asks if you are all right. You smile, this time a real smile. I am starting to be, you say. The words sound peculiar, yet accurate. Evening traffic crawls. In the pause, you recall the philosopher's instruction to live as though you would relive every moment. The red brake lights ahead look like a ribbon of warning. Would you repeat this commute for eternity? Maybe not, but the new life does not demand immediate relocation. It demands presence. You turn off the news station and play music you loved before algorithms decided your playlist. A forgotten lyric stirs something younger than nostalgia. Home again. The living room feels different. You see objects bought to impress visitors who never looked closely. A decorative vase with no personal meaning. A stack of books recommended by people whose approval mattered more than the content. You pick one book that genuinely calls to you and place the rest in a box for donation. No ceremony, just quiet reclamation. Dinner is simple. You savor. At the table, you imagine a future memory of this night. Consider whether you would choose its repetition. The answer leans toward yes. Not because it is spectacular, but because it is honest. As darkness falls, you step outside to look at a dim slice of sky between buildings. Stars barely visible remind you that the universe is not grading your performance. Mortality feels less like a threat and more like a compass pointing toward authenticity. The philosopher once wrote that the secret is not to avoid suffering, but to assign it purpose. You repeat that sentence until it seeps past intellect. Before sleep, you write 3 lines. I refused automatic obedience once today. I tasted my own life during lunch. I allowed fear to redirect me rather than disable me. You close the notebook. The whisper settles into silence. Not because it disappeared, but because it became voice. Tomorrow may test these resolves, yet something irreversible has occurred. The second life has begun its quiet expansion, and the first life, like an outdated shell, starts to crack and fall away. Inside the unfamiliar quiet of early dawn, you sense a current tugging beneath the surface of ordinary tasks. It moves through the routine as water through sand, rearranging grains you once believed immovable. During the walk to the corner market for fresh bread, you observe shopkeepers arranging displays, their motions precise yet detached, expressions locked somewhere between fatigue and resignation. You catch your reflection in a glass door and remember how often you have mirrored that same dull choreography. A pulse of urgency rises. Not panic this time, but recognition. What continues unconsciously defines you more than grand resolutions spoken aloud. You enter the store and pause at the first aisle. Rows of cereal boxes shout promises of vitality with bright colours and manufactured cheer. Another aisle over, glossy magazines instruct you on better ways to age, to stay slim, to captivate. Every package sells adjustment, as if existence itself requires constant polish. A question surfaces uninvited. How much of your energy has been spent sanding edges to fit these molds? The realization feels like pulling splinters from skin you never noticed were embedded. Tiny pains, cumulative relief. Selecting a loaf, you remember the project note saved on your phone the night before. A warmth flickers. Possibility needs small, consistent sparks, not weekend bonfires that quickly exhaust themselves. You commit to 15 minutes of work on that idea after breakfast. 15 minutes is inconsequential to an old life built on all-or-nothing fantasies. Yet within a second life, 15 genuine minutes outweigh hours of performative busyness. Walking home, you see a neighbor coaxing a reluctant dog along the sidewalk. The dog resists, sits stubbornly, refusing forward motion. The scene resembles your inner resistance when new impulses invite you beyond familiar territory. You smile at the metaphor, nod to the neighbor, continue. The mind is a creature that prefers predictable fences. Yet you are learning to open gates gently, persuading rather than forcing. Back indoors, the kettle whistles. Steam curls upward like a reminder that even water transforms under heat. You pour, breathe the rising aroma, and open your laptop. 15 minutes. Cursor blinks. The voice of doubt whispers that this draft will embarrass you, that professional critics exist everywhere. Doubt once masqueraded as prudence. Today you recognize the costume. You type anyway. Sentences are uneven, awkward, but alive. The timer dings. You resist the urge to keep going. Momentum thrives on manageable stretches, not heroic sprints that provoke burnout. Closing the document, you feel a small flame of pride. Mid-morning arrives with obligations. A family member calls, launching into complaints about finances, neighbors, aches. Previously, you would offer solutions, placate, absorb tension. Today, you listen with presence yet without absorbing. When a pause opens, you say, "I hear how frustrating that feels." Silence follows on the line, perhaps surprised that you did not rush to fix. You add, "What do you think your next step might be?" Responsibility slides back to its rightful owner. The call ends sooner than usual, leaving you lighter and then perhaps unsettled but empowered. The learning is immediate. Boundaries are not walls. They are invitations for others to stand on their own ground. You are not callous, you are exchanging codependency for mutual respect. The philosopher spoke of bearing discomfort to protect authenticity. This conversation illustrates the principle in miniature. Lunch brings a meeting with a longtime friend who remembers earlier versions of you, versions that laughed at safe jokes and conformed to shared nostalgia. You arrive a few minutes early, noticing nervous flutter in your stomach. Will new honesty create distance? The friend arrives, conversation begins. In the middle of recounting workplace gossip, they ask your opinion. You inhale, offer a thoughtful critique instead of easy agreement. Their eyebrows rise, moment stretches, then curiosity dawns. A deeper dialogue unfolds, less shiny, more real. You leave the cafe aware that some relationships will evolve, others may fracture, but each must meet you where you truly stand. Afternoon quiet returns. You open a closet to find clothes once purchased to suit expectations, shoes that hurt, jackets that impress but constrict, patterns chosen for boardroom camouflage. With measured calm, you separate pieces into keep and release piles. Each garment you discard feels like peeling away a scripted scene. The suitcase fills for donation. Space emerges, literal and psychological. Late afternoon, sunlight slants across your desk. You remember the philosopher's assertion that one must be willing to endure isolation to pursue authentic direction. You test this claim by logging off social media for the evening. The urge to post snapshots of productivity or curated wisdom flares then fades. In the silence, you read a slim volume of poetry that once stirred you but was shelved for being impractical. Lines land with resonance previously dulled by constant noise. Isolation, you discover, is fertile soil when chosen consciously. Dinner is shared with someone special who notices small changes. They comment on a calmer aura. You explain nothing grand, only mention trying to live more deliberately. Instead of discussing external achievements, you speak about sensations, the satisfaction of true yes, the relief of clear no. Conversation deepens, eye contact lingers. Authenticity proves magnetic to kindred spirits. Night descends. You stroll outside beneath streetlights, reflecting on the accumulation of small choices since dawn. None revolutionary alone, yet together they create a day you might willingly repeat. The philosopher's eternal recurrence challenge seems less impossible. A street musician plays a melancholy tune. You pause, listen fully, drop coins without calculating value. Moments later, you catch yourself laughing quietly for no reason other than the pleasure of existing awake. Home again, you journal. Not bullet points of accomplishments, but impressions. The warmth of bread crust, the colour of sky reflected in puddles, the courage inside a simple refusal. The entry ends with a declaration written in plain letters. Today mattered. Before sleep, you check the calendar. Tomorrow holds meetings, errands, obligations much like today's. Yet something fundamental has pivoted. The axis is internal. You are no longer postponing permission. You feel both terrified and exhilarated, a combination indicating proximity to purpose. As you turn off the lamp, a final reflection surfaces. Many will not understand these shifts. Some may ridicule, some may withdraw. Yet Nietzsche warned that the herd fears any departure from its comforting blur. The herd cannot dictate what purpose whispers. Listening to that whisper has become non-negotiable. Sleep arrives gently, not as escape, but as rest earned by living. Dreams might still serve echoes of past complacency, but the second life has secured its foothold. Each honest breath moving forward will widen the gap between existence and living, until the two merge and repetition of any given day feels like gratitude rather than punishment. In the hush just before unconsciousness, you sense absolute clarity. Small consistencies, not dramatic revolutions, forge the bridge from regret to fulfillment. Tomorrow, you will wake not to weight, but to momentum. And the ceiling will appear lighter because it no longer bears the burden of your denial. Morning carries a sharper edge now that awareness has lodged itself behind your eyes. The alarm sounds, and instead of hitting snooze, you sit up, spine straight, letting the thought settle that each minute carries the weight of permanence. A quick glance at the phone reveals overnight emails already demanding response. You choose silence for 15 more minutes, brewing coffee in steady motions, refusing to spill presents into obligations before the day even begins. The philosopher once wrote that people hurry because they are afraid to look at themselves too closely. You decide to look anyway. On the ride to work, the usual chatter on public transport feels louder. Headlines scroll across tiny screens, each one a siren of outrage or consumption. You watch faces glow in that light and wonder how many of them will remember a single article hours from now. Your gaze shifts to a window where your reflection wavers against passing buildings. It strikes you that until recently, you lived through a similar glow, soaking in curated outrage to fill the yawning gap left by your neglected purpose. Today you turn from the reflection and close your eyes, letting the city rattle past while you breathe in 4 counts. Hold 1, breathe out 6. The lungs respond with gratitude. At the office lobby, you meet a familiar colleague who launches into the weekly litany of complaints about management. Habit once made you join the chorus, bonding through shared bitterness. Instead you listen, nod, and when the torrent pauses, you ask, "What part of this can you change?" The colleague blinks, taken aback, then shrugs. Maybe nothing. You smile gently. Then we either accept or we act. Staying in limbo eats us. Your words surprise even you. They sound like advice delivered to your past self. The colleague mumbles something about meeting a deadline and walks away. A flicker of guilt arises yet fades when you remember that honesty can feel abrasive to those allergic to agency. In the elevator, you press the button for your floor and notice your heart beating steady. Confrontation once spiked adrenaline. Now it feels like alignment. The doors open. Your desk waits with neatly stacked tasks. Before diving in, you write a sentence on a sticky note and place it beside the keyboard. Remember why you are here. Not here in the office, but here in existence. The note becomes a silent compass throughout the day. Mid-morning supplies a challenge. A superior assigns a rushed project that requires weekend hours. Old self would nod instantly. You ask for 10 minutes to confirm capacity. Behind closed office door, you weigh values. Rest and personal projects occupy your weekend plan. Guilt taps your shoulder. You acknowledge it, ask what it fears. It whispers that refusal risks job security. You thank the fear for protecting livelihood all these years and promise diligence within humane limits. Returning to the superior, you propose an alternate timeline that preserves quality. They frown, hinting at disappointment. You hold eye contact, steady breath. After a moment, they concede. Walking back to your desk, you feel a warmth of self-respect stronger than any fleeting compliment might offer. Lunch is eaten outside again. This time, under the shadow of tall buildings. A pigeon hops near your feet, pecks at crumbs, and flutters away. You realise there was a time you would have scrolled through lunch, skipping awareness of such minor life. Presence now draws colour out of concrete surroundings. You imagine repeating this lunch infinitely. The thought does not produce dread. Progress is measurable in that easing. Afternoon brings a meeting in which you present a small segment of the new project. Questions come, some helpful, some laced with skepticism. One remark implies, "Your idea lacks depth." Instead of shrinking, you ask the speaker to elaborate. They stumble, caught off guard. Discussion shifts from judgment to collaborative exploration. By session's end, your concept stands stronger, no longer requiring universal approval because you provided clarity rather than defense. Nietzsche hinted that one must be ready to withstand moments of isolation in order to gift new value to the world. You feel that isolation in the silence after the meeting, yet it burns clean instead of sour. On the commute home, rain begins. People huddle beneath awnings. You step into the drizzle, coat hood down, letting cool droplets tap your face. Each drop feels tangible, more intense because you are not splitting your focus. The philosopher's eternal lens hovers. Would you endure this rain forever? The cold prickles skin, but also heightens senses. You answer yes. Not because rain is pleasant, but because presence is preferable to numb comfort. Evening arrives with an invitation from friends to a bar you previously visited every week. You know the conversation will orbit the same complaints, the same safe laughter. You consider your energy, weighed against the quiet work you planned on your project idea. A sigh escapes. You text a polite decline. Immediately, the inner chorus of old fears chirps about missing out, about social bonds. You breathe, acknowledging, then let the phone rest. The project note awaits. You open the document and begin expanding that fragile outline into a first paragraph. Words stumble, then flow. An hour passes unnoticed. When you stop, 3 pages exist where nothing stood. Satisfaction settles deeper than any cocktail buzz. Later, you call a relative who once criticized your unconventional aspirations. Conversation begins with their usual cautionary tone, warnings about risk. This time, you listen without absorbing, then share what you worked on. You speak not for validation, but for expression. The relative falls silent, then says they are proud. You recognize the sentiment might waver later, yet you accept it without dependency. Independence grows roots each time you share truth regardless of outcome. Night deepens. Instead of streaming shows until sleep, you sit at a small table with candlelight. A blank paper lies before you. At the top, you write 3 non-negotiables. Under that header, you list presence, purpose, integrity. You define each in a single sentence. presence. I will inhabit each moment as though it repeats eternally. Purpose. I will pour energy into creation that aligns with inner calling. Integrity. I will match words with actions, even when comfort protests. You place the page beside your bed. In the dim glow, it resembles a contract with the self you once ignored. When you finally lie down, fatigue blends with contentment. The ceiling no longer feels heavy. Instead, it is a canvas for possibility, sketched by streetlight seeping through blinds. You understand now that authenticity is cumulative. One refusal of autopilot, one courageous question, one small creative act. Each is a brick. Soon a bridge forms, carrying you from mere existence to the shoreline of true living. Watching the bridge extend is thrilling and terrifying because it leaves the safety of the mainland behind. The philosopher's voice murmurs that safety was always an illusion. Exile the only honest address for those who refuse to betray their why. You whisper a quiet amen to that exile. The dark hums back like a companion, assuring you that solitude chosen in service of life is no loneliness at all. Weekend light spills through the blinds, and you wake with a half-remembered dream of climbing a staircase that never ends. Instead of frustration, you feel a quiet determination. Each step in the dream seems to echo Nietzsche's thought experiment of eternal return. If this moment were to recur infinitely, how would you greet it? The question accompanies your morning stretch. You do not seek an abstract answer in philosophical texts, but in the way your feet meet the floor, in the way your breath expands your ribs, in the stillness before you unlock your phone. Choosing to delay the screen becomes a vow to greet recurrence with intention rather than reflex. You brew coffee and open a journal, not to record a to-do list, but to interrogate motives. Nietzsche insisted that life becomes bearable only when you possess a why strong enough to shoulder any how. You ask yourself, why create this new project? The old self would respond with external metrics, money, prestige, applause. The answer now feels more elemental. To discover what vitality sounds like when it has your voice. That why feels light yet immovable, like a lodestone in the chest. Once articulated, the how, drafts, edits, uncertain audiences shrinks from mountain to staircase. You write it at the top of the page. My work will be an anthem to the parts of me that never received permission. Underneath you note practical steps for the day, but they orbit the Y-like planets around a fixed sun. Stepping outside, you walk a familiar route, but notice details that once escaped you. The slight tilt of a lamppost, the cinnamon scent from a bakery, the way a stray newspaper flutters against a doorway. The philosopher wrote of amor fati, the love of one's fate, urging acceptance so complete that you would choose every event exactly as it occurs. You practice by embracing trivial realities instead of wishing them different. A drizzle begins. You lift your face to it. A car horn blares. You smile at its reminder of shared existence. Acceptance does not dull ambition. It sharpens awareness. The drizzle, the horn, the bakery scent, all weave into the single, irrepeatable tapestry you call today. Returning home, you set a timer and immerse in project work. Doubt whispers about market competition, about algorithms burying originality. Another Nietzschean thread surfaces. The will to power, not as domination over others, but as the creative drive to actualize potential against inertia. You decide that each keystroke, each problem solved, each fear confronted is an act of that will. The timer rings. You're surprised an hour has passed. Pages accumulate, imperfect yet unmistakably alive. Midday invites errands. In the grocery line, you overhear a couple debating which brand is better for their image. Their anxiety is palpable. Nietzsche criticized such herd instincts that trade genuine values for collective validation. Instead of judging, you observe how easy it would be to slip back into that comfort, how the herd welcomes you with soft pathways and predictable applause. You pay for your items, leaving with a strange gratitude for the visible reminder of what you are choosing to resist. An old friend texts an invitation to a large social gathering. Memories rush back. Nights spent performing conviviality, drained mornings after. You consider Nietzsche's counsel that authenticity often requires a willingness to stand alone. You type a courteous decline, explaining you need solitude for creative work. The friend responds with a playful jab about your new hermit streak. You accept the label without shame. Hermitage, you realize, is sometimes the birthplace of integrity. Evening finds you reading a passage where Nietzsche describes those who paint their own bars gold, yet remain imprisoned. The image resonates with the glossy job titles, the curated feeds, the expensive distractions you once pursued. You set the book aside and survey your living space. Unused gadgets, trendy decor, and unread books clutter shelves. You begin a slow purge, placing each object in keep or release piles. The process feels ceremonial. Each discarded item an exorcism of inauthentic ambitions. When you finish, space breathes, and so do you. You cook dinner from scratch, chopping vegetables with deliberate rhythm. The act feels subversive, choosing unhurried nourishment in a culture that worships efficiency. You plate the meal and eat in silence, practicing the philosopher's directive to affirm existence in every bite. Between forkfuls, you consider tomorrow's loop. Would you willingly relive this meal? Yes, because it tastes of agency. Nightfall brings reflection rather than scrolling. You open your journal again and write, "Today I accepted drizzle, decline, solitude, and simplicity. I reclaimed an hour of creation and cleared space for more." You underline the word more, not in quantity, but in depth. Nietzsche warned that most people decorate their graves while awaiting permission to live. You pledge that each cleared shelf, each honest no, each purposeful yes, removes a handful of soil from that premature burial. Before sleep, you practice a brief meditation. Inhale while recalling a moment you lived awake today. Exhale while releasing a lingering urge to perform. 3 cycles. Simple, yet the room feels lighter. The philosopher's face drifts through your imagination, stern, challenging, yet strangely approving. He once wrote that the purpose of suffering is to teach us to dance. You recognize the subtle choreography of your day. Steps of refusal, leaps of creativity, pauses of presence. It is not yet a masterpiece, but the music has finally reached your ears. Lights out. In the darkness, you accept that tomorrow will bring new tests. Unexpected criticism, temptations to comply, waves of doubt. Yet you sense a growing core of clarity, a center that can bear recurrence. If eternity demanded the repetition of this day, you would not scream. You would nod, perhaps even smile, ready to refine the dance. Nietzsche insisted that this nod, this willingness, is the measure of a life embraced rather than endured. As sleep approaches, you whisper a simple phrase into the dark, "Thank you," unsure whether it is addressed to the universe, the philosopher, or the once silent self now beginning to speak. Whatever the recipient, gratitude answers back in the rhythm of a steady, unreluctant heartbeat. The night is quiet, and the city has slipped into its soft mechanical breathing. You stand by the window, sensing how far the day has carried you. From the first uneasy glance in the morning mirror to the final exhale beside a cleared shelf, you have practiced the art that Nietzsche sketched in fierce lines. You have tested eternal return by asking whether each choice deserved repetition. You have honored the will to power by turning raw fear into small acts of creation. You have tasted amor fati by welcoming drizzle, criticism, and solitude as ingredients of a life that is finally yours. Now the question passes from narration to you. What corners of tomorrow still belong to the herd? Which habitual yes will you replace with a deliberate no? Where will you trade performance for presence, comfort for courage, approval for authenticity? The second life does not begin when circumstances soften. It begins the moment you decide that time is more precious than applause. Decide again when sunrise cuts through the blinds. Decide again when doubt whispers at midday. Decide again when fatigue tempts you to postpone purpose until a mythical later. If this journey has stirred the part of you that refuses to die unfinished, let that refusal leave an imprint. Tap the like button, so the algorithm of distractions must acknowledge your awakening. Subscribe if you want more deep dives that challenge, comfort, and celebrate conscious living. Fill the comments with the sentence that marks commitment. I choose my second life today. Read the voices of others who choose, and know you are not alone on the path that often feels solitary. Close the window, turn out the light, and rest in the strange peace that follows a day lived on your own terms. Tomorrow the staircase appears again, yet every step is lighter because you no longer climb for spectators. You climb because existence is a miracle that will never repeat, and you are finally awake enough to feel each rung beneath your feet.